everyone. We are recording in the FarmRaise studio, and my name is Jayce. I am the CEO of FarmRaise, and I am joined here by Zach Ducheneaux, who is the administrator of Farm Service Agency. Zach, we're just so pumped to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us again. It's wonderful to be back with you.
Really good to be back. Looking forward to a conversation again today, and really thank you for helping us spread the word about the important changes in the mindset and culture at the Farm Service Agency.
There have been so many changes underway over the past few years. It's been incredible to watch those developments. And we are today going to be talking about some of the specific changes and opportunities that align with a pretty heavy topic, disaster assistance, and how farmers can access FSA resources when they've been hit by a natural disaster like a hurricane or a tornado or another unexpected event. We've seen recently some pretty devastating impacts across producers in the Southeast following the impact of Hurricane Helene and some other storms this past fall and this past summer. Zach, where have you seen producers impacted the most? Have you, are there any insights you can pull out from the past few months as we've been dealing with these hurricane hits?
Absolutely. So I think we should preface the conversation by saying that where we've got standing programs and where we've got fairly customary production practices that have been there for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, we've got a pretty good toolkit in risk management through federally subsidized crop insurance or through our non-insured disaster assistance program to help with the rebuilding. The recovery period is really what we're talking about with disaster programs, and where we've seen just cataclysmic damages with the hurricane. Specifically, I had a chance to visit some of the impacted counties in North Carolina, and it's damage like I've never seen before in any other disaster. The rainfall in the mountains led to torrential floods that literally washed away not only the crop, it washed away the means to produce the crop in the trees, and then washed away the soil that they're going to need to rebuild. We don't have tools for that. And because of that, we have to make sure that we're providing the most flexibility we can within our existing suite of tools to help with the recovery, because accessing these programs and services shouldn't be a chore that someone has to have on the back of their mind as they start to clean up debris, as they start to assess the situation. We've got to make it easier for folks to come in and access these programs on a time frame that works for them.
There are two threads I want to pull out here. The first one is around unprecedented. It sounds like, Zach, what you saw in place in North Carolina are disaster impacts that are rare or maybe never seen before in that location, like talking literally about the topsoil washing away. Is this something that you have seen as a pattern across your time as administrator? Have you seen this in other locations as well, unprecedented impacts, or is this very specific to Helene's hit?
I think it's indicative of the fact that the climate is changing and our tools are going to have to change to keep up. Before 5 years ago, I'd never heard of a derecho. And now we have one about every year that triggers a disaster declaration, where we've got things that normally stand through an annual wind across entire regions are just leveled. So the earth is trying to tell us something. We need to make sure that we're sharpening our tools so that we're able to help our producers navigate through these uncertainties as we work to help empower them to be part of the solution as well.
As you think about empowerment, how are disaster programs changing to enable that flexibility? This is the second thread here, right? Like making it easier for producers to access these programs, ensuring they're flexible, but also adapting them to the changing impacts you're seeing.
I think it helps to zoom out just a little bit, Jayce, and talk about the structure of disaster assistance. First, we have the authorizing language for disaster assistance. That's the laws passed by Congress. Within those laws, there's discretion conferred to the departments or the executive branch to run those programs and administer them. In the case of the Department of Agriculture, where we have that type of discretion, the secretary promulgates regulations, and where there's discretion left within regulations, agency officials like I have the opportunity to construct policy. So it's a statutory, regulatory, and policy-based framework for delivering these essential disaster resources. That's on the authorization side. On the appropriation side, there's got to be some money to deliver through those processes. What we've worked on in this administration in the last 3.75 years is really finding all of the flexibility that we can within our statutory, regulatory, and policy framework to make sure we're doing everything that we can to meet producers where they're at in a timely manner, but respectful of their reality. In many cases where we have the cataclysmic winter storms or the floods that we had in North Carolina, you might not realize livestock losses for months and months. So having an arbitrary deadline of X number of days after you realize there's a loss causes producers to not even come in and apply because they didn't have the information at the ready. We've made sure that we've been very public about the discretion that we expect our staff to offer, and we've codified that in many cases in new regulations and in new policy statements that you can find on our website. We've also been very forthright in our conversations with our friends on the Hill about where the gaps are. In every year since I believe 2017, there has been additional disaster programming authorized and appropriated that transcends existing risk management and recovery tools. We had WIP Plus in 2017, 18, 19. We had the market facilitation program, which was to deal with the trade war impacts on producers' commodity prices. Then we had the emergency relief program for 20 and 21, and then the emergency relief program for 22. All of those were new authorizations where the agency and the department were charged with standing up a new program using the resources that were offered in those appropriation bills, get the resources out to the producers. And important to note, we didn't get additional staff to do that.
You're able to perform that opportunity, to execute that opportunity with your existing capacity.
Yeah.
How did that scale? How did you get that to scale? Because that's a hard thing to do, right? Like bringing in new infrastructure and opportunity to farmers in the moment without having to grow your own team to deliver that.
With regard to ERP 20 and 21 and ERP 22, we did receive a 1% allocation of the available funds to staff up, but that's
1%. That's
speaks to the efficiency and dedication of the FSA team and all federal employees. When offered the opportunity to provide assistance, they rise to the occasion and get it out there to the intended stakeholders. So I can't praise our staff enough. In addition to their regular duties of implementing a farm bill, which is still the largest non-defense appropriation action that I know of, our staff get these other programs out alongside that work because they're committed to our producers. And oftentimes in the last 3.5 years, they've done that knowing full well that they're operating under a continuing resolution so that there isn't necessarily a paycheck for them for that whole fiscal year.
Wow.
The stress on our staff can't be overstated. And I hope all of the listeners, when they do go to that county office, take my gratitude and theirs in there to that office, because that staff is doing two separate jobs as they deliver these programs. When the conversations around those ERP programs and the ongoing conversation with the Hill on a disaster relief supplemental package, we try to be a good partner in providing our best estimate of a number for what that assistance is going to be. In the case of ERP 20 and 21, we covered non-indemnified losses and folks that didn't have any crop insurance or risk management tools.
Mm-hmm.
We offered a number to Congress of $10 billion. We received it. We rolled those two programs out for those 2 years and had real good success with the program and created a new approach to delivering disaster assistance that's based on revenue instead of solely based on crop or production losses. We were able to take a look at the revenue for folks in high value or non-traditional crops and use the fall off in revenue as the indicator of loss and work to mitigate that. In ERP for 2022, when we were asked how much it was going to be, we told Congress it was going to be $10 billion just for 2022. We received $3.4 billion, which puts us in the position of trying to make choices about how best to allocate that. Yeah. Really proud of the steps this administration took to try to keep small farmers on the farm and emphasized disaster relief to small farmers through a progressive factoring system where the amount of loss triggered the amount of assistance.
Can you share more about how you enabled smaller producers to get access during this? Because, you know, it's fascinating, right? When we think about the long tail of agriculture, a lot of times we overlook or discount the fact that, you know, around 88% of all farms are still considered small farm operators. The vast majority of the around 2 million farms are small farms. But in terms of volume, it's significant. So as someone who came from a small farm, what changed? How would I be thinking about these opportunities and the access there with this innovation at FSA?
So as we took a look at available resources, we also took a look at the losses that our producers had suffered. And then we also did take a look at the risk management strategies and tools that are available to those producers. Mm-hmm. Often our smaller farmers don't have the capacity and frankly financial resource to take advantage of risk management tools, even with a federal subsidy on the premium. So we took a look at the loss and we bucketed up the loss in, I believe, a $10,000 increment and then a $2,000 increment above that. I can double check the numbers and get you some clarification that you can put on the portal. But the first X number of loss all received 100% payment.
Wow.
The next level up of loss received a reduced percentage of payment all the way up to a factor of 10%. So, but if you were in that first tranche of loss, you received 100% coverage on your non-indemnified loss. Tremendous success. Then a result of that was that our producers, the result was that in 82% of the cases, using this progressive factoring system, producers received a higher payment than they would have if we'd have just divided it flat across the board. Mm-hmm. As you can imagine, there are some folks that felt like they were on the short end of the stick with that. Mm-hmm. And it really kind of disturbed me that it created a divide between the small farmers and the large farmers. And many large farmers came out very vocally about how they were being mistreated in the delivery of this program.
Wow.
If we would have had the resource, we'd have delivered the program the same way we did before. It isn't a function of the system that we devised, it's a function of available resources. And I think that farmers all across the country are better served by banding together and advocating mm-hmm. for appropriate resources to mitigate these impacts instead of trying to let a wedge get driven between them so that they're on opposite sides of a conversation.
This is a pattern I've seen in the past with advocacy for government programs. I've seen this wedge happen around EQIP specifically, and in other contexts as well. But instead of dwelling on, the wedge cases, what about cases when you have seen small and large operators band together to advocate for a change? Have you seen any of that as, in the past few years, or anything that we can look to as an inspiring model here?
I think we did see that in ERP for 2020 and 2021. There was wide accolade for the revenue-based model for disaster assistance because it's a catch-all. And it can help with the folks that are growing walnuts or almonds out in California. It can help with the folks that are growing apples in North Carolina. Or growing pasture pork in some other part of the country. That revenue-based approach takes a holistic look at the operation and attempts to address the impacts of the disaster by making up some of the lost revenue. And we had wide support from small and large producer alike across many different industries, from wine grapes to table grapes to row crops and everything in between, for that approach.
That's cool to see that patchwork of producers coming together. Just getting now, looking at practically speaking, when I, as a producer, am impacted by a hurricane or a storm, and I'm waking up the next morning and seeing the damage, I want to shift gears a little bit and hear from that perspective, what would you advise I do first? What is the right order of operations as a rancher or a farmer when I'm hit with a natural disaster? And how can I leverage that step by step to best engage the resources of FSA?
Speaking from personal experience, having lived through the winter storm of Atlas, first and foremost, if you wake up in the morning and your family and loved ones and your home are in good shape, take a breath. The rest of this is going to work itself out. That's some of the biggest stress that we have on our producers. And it's not because of the disaster. And this ties into the comments or the conversation we had in the previous podcast. It's about finances. And what producers need to do after they take that collective breath and start to survey the damage is understand that this version of the Farm Service Agency is very interested in being flexible and not getting in the way as you start that cleanup. By virtue of that, we've established a lot of flexibilities in the deployment of these disaster programs that weren't there previously. They were available to be leveraged. This administration said, hey, we're going to get out of the way. We're going to make this work. Allowing debris cleaning to commence sooner, allowing folks to start work that doesn't go below the plow line, getting expedited environmental clearances, allowing for flexible reporting dates for this so that producers don't have to be thinking about, man, I got to get to the FSA office in X number of days after this happens. We can be flexible. Another of the things with all of our programs that I think we don't say enough, more often than not, there are late filing opportunities. Some of them come with a small fee and the need for a review by your county committee. But if your county committee is out there accurately representing your interests, they should be amenable to that and exercise their discretion to get you in the door. That's why we have a late filing process anyway.
How late can I file? What's the latest I could go?
It varies with each program, Jayce, and it wouldn't be fair to the listeners to try to put a date specific out there, but with all of our programs, I encourage producers to file an application. Even when our well-intentioned and overworked staff say you're going to be denied because you're late, file your application, because without a piece of paper indicating your intention to participate, you don't have any due process rights. And if you have a piece of paper with that information on it and the county committee doesn't allow you to participate or accept your late filed application, you can appeal that through a chain of command that ultimately can land with the National Appeals Division. And they don't mind helping us get it right when they think that we've got it wrong.
Yeah. There's a lot of opportunity there, it sounds like, and often opportunity that we don't even know exists as producers. So I think very tactically, after I wake up and I know that my loved ones are okay and my home is okay. And I love that call out. Like, it's good to say, hey, let's take a beat and sit in gratitude for the fact of knowing what's going right here. Once I've made that step, is the next step for me then to understand, okay, like, what's available to me as a producer? And tactically speaking, where do I go to figure that out? Do I make a call? Do I go onto a platform? Do I go to farmers.gov? Where do I figure out what's next?
On farmers.gov, we've revamped our website, trying to catch up with the times, and it's a lot easier to find the fact sheets for each of the disaster programs now. But we do have a document. We do have a document on there called Disasters at a Glance.
Disasters at a Glance. Okay.
Where you can see it laid out in table form. We need to be accommodating of the different methods of people to uptake information. Some folks are visual, some folks are readers, some folks are listeners, some folks learn by doing. So the Disaster at a Glance is a visual representation of the programs with a table that lines it up by eligible disaster events.
Wow.
That's a good tool. Farmers.gov. I know you've got some great stuff on the portal where you're trying to help build out alongside of us tools that producers can use to be more actionable when they do come to our office, because our staff want to make the most of that time together. So if we can offer tools outside of our process where a producer can populate our forms and come in there ready, and it's as simple as handing off an application, that saves our staff time for folks that maybe really need a higher touch relationship with their FSA officers.
Absolutely. And this is, for our listeners, zooming out, FSA and FarmRaise are collaborating around an educational hub that offers digital tools that enable cooperators of FSA and the USDA and farmers to structure their information and come prepared and equipped with knowledge so that they can more efficiently take advantage of FSA programs, just like you said, Zach. And the tools that Zach is alluding to here are actually on the FSA Educational Hub. If you come to FarmRaise and check out the Educational Hub page, we have some amazing modules that are specifically geared toward taking advantage of emergency relief. The way these modules work, and we really, by the way, listeners, we need your help getting the word out about this hub. We want to make sure every cooperator and producer can take advantage of the free tools available here. But they're specifically around emergency relief. We have an ELAP decision tool, the Emergency Assistance for Livestock, Honeybees, and Farm-Raised Fish program, and then the Livestock Indemnity program. We have another decision tool there. And these decision tools enable producers and cooperators to, one, determine, am I eligible for this emergency relief program? And then if you are, two, get organized, get all your paperwork in order in this one module so that you can then take that paperwork already organized into your local FSA office and efficiently spend your time with that FSA officer or staff member talking about what matters and not doing paperwork. This will help you take advantage of these resources in the highest and best way. And at the bottom line, the goal is to really increase every producer with the knowledge they need to be able to succeed in these situations, especially these difficult situations where there's a lot of emotional and financial fallout after a big disaster like that. Zach, I have to ask you, I've heard once from a seasoned producer that after you've surveyed the damage, the first thing that producers want to do is go in and clean up everything. But that producer said, no, wait, make sure you take pictures of everything before you start cleaning up. Is that like a tried and true thing, or is that more of an urban or a rural legend that is now being propagated?
The better documentation you can have up to and including date stamp photos, the better our team is going to be able to demonstrate to auditors or reviewers that we're taking the steps to preserve program integrity. Because
Wow.
at the end of the day, our staff are stewards of taxpayer resources
Yeah.
to needs as indicated by Congress. So what we have stressed in the last 3 years is sometimes that doesn't exist. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And that doesn't mean the disaster didn't happen and there weren't impacts. So we've got to be able to exercise our flexibility there and acknowledge that some producers don't have a phone that they can take a picture with. Some producers may just keep a record book in their shirt pocket and their house might have just washed away in the flood.
Right.
You know, we have to be accommodating and meet people where they're at. So we've really worked to promote to our staff that we're going to support you in being flexible with your producers. We've also worked a lot with our county committees to help them understand we will support you in your flexibility as well. Your job is to find ways to deliver the programs, not to find reasons not to deliver the programs. Really reframing that conversation around disaster response so that we can be a better partner for producers all around the country.
Oh yeah, Zach, I can totally see how that would be really resonant with producers, meeting them where they're at in terms of the tools they have available and what the disaster is and where they're located, just giving that flexibility of it's such a compassionate response in a time of specific need. And again, like the same theme as what we saw when we were talking, a couple weeks ago about the new loan rules, you all are approaching this from a very welcoming, open door policy, which I really appreciate because it's lowering those barriers to entry and enabling producers who maybe never interfaced with FSA before to feel welcome and comfortable coming in the door.
Yeah, and it helps. One of the strengths that we've been able to leverage in this administration is folks out there in the countryside like you, like the socially disadvantaged representing groups, the historically underserved groups, farmers, farmer veterans, young farmers, minority representing groups who maybe didn't get this warm reception in the past.
Yeah.
And as a result, don't think of the FSA first when a disaster happens. We've really leveraged cooperators and cooperative agreements so that we've got additional people out there who have always been there for those stakeholder groups, who have maintained that level of trust. Hopefully we can provide resources and borrow some of their credibility and trust to get people back in the door. Another big changes we've made is in our NAP program, a producer simply fills out the FSA 860 form, which declares your status as an underserved producer. You're enrolled in NAP now.
What is NAP?
NAP is the Non-Insured Disaster Assistance Program. It is a catastrophic level coverage for crops that don't have federally subsidized crop insurance. And it's a pretty low level of coverage, but you can buy up that coverage as well with a small fee. And for all producers, there's simply an administrative fee to help cover the cost of the program. But for socially disadvantaged producers, there is a fee waiver that has been created that allows people to come in because they might not have the resources to do that because they haven't been party to the programs for generations like everybody else. We want them to have that catastrophic level coverage as seamlessly as we can.
Wow. So there are a couple call outs here that I want to emphasize for any producers listening. One, practically, as soon as your disaster hits and you've surveyed and understand that your family and your house is safe, before you clean up, document. And if that looks like taking photos because you have a phone, great. If not, gather any other evidence that you can to make this process of accessing relief easier. And then the next step is this open call, this open door that FSA is putting forward to all producers to come in and to know that you're welcome, and really encouraged to come in and build this relationship in your time of need, or in a different time as well. But there's this open door that we see here that's, I think, is really exciting for producers everywhere, Zach. Thank you so much for sharing these exciting updates about the flexibilities you're building into the emergency relief system. We are honored to be one of your a cooperator with FSA, and I am hopeful that the future of these programs will continue to be one that is designed alongside farmers with their needs at its heart, which is something that I've really seen your team exemplifying, and we're so grateful for.
And there's one way that producers can ensure that that happens, Jayce. Right now, our county committee elections are open. You can serve on our county committee and bring your inclination about what you think federal programming should be to the decision-making process. You can make sure that your interests are represented on your county committee. If you're in a local administrative area that's having a vacancy this year, you'll be getting a ballot in the mail. If you think you should be getting a ballot but didn't, go to your local office and let them know you'd like to get a ballot. Take part in this, because that is the only instance in the federal government where a citizen stakeholder has this meaningful a voice in whether or not programs and services are going to be delivered. And if you're not represented there, your interests may not rise to the threshold of the policymakers. Another important part to stress is that the statutes for our supplemental disaster assistance programs are really brief. There's maybe 65, 70 lines all together. There's a lot of discretion conferred to the secretary in there, and our regulations are fairly brief in this regard as well. But the important part about those programs is they're funded through the Commodity Credit Corporation, and they don't need to wait on a congressional appropriation, which in this case is great because we only have a continuing resolution that runs out through December 20th to actually fund the government. But these programs, because they have their own separate authorization and access to the Commodity Credit Corporation to fund the program themselves, are tremendous tools that can provide timely response and timely adjustments to programs to producers. We've been able to make some significant pivots with very little lead time in, for instance, our ELAP program. When that program was when we made the first meaningful adjustments to that program, we offered a opportunity for producers to get assistance with freight for the extra mileage they're having to put on to haul feed to their livestock. We rolled it out. We were pretty proud of it. We got some feedback from some of our producers, and they said, we need to sharpen your pencil, Zach, because it makes more sense for us to haul the cows to the feed or the livestock to the feed. So rather than just dig in and say, no, by God, we said so, it took us a lot of work to get there, we changed it within weeks and made that accommodation. And then we've kept going back and finding additional flexibility based on the needs identified by producers to us through our county office system, through our state office system, and reaching out directly to the national office through their stakeholder groups. So there's still opportunity here to continue this flexible approach where discretion is used to get people in the door. And I hope you all take advantage of it. And we look forward to seeing you out there in the county office.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great call to action. Thank you, Zach. Really appreciate your time today and hope to have you back here soon for another conversation.
I hope so. We'll see you.
Bye.